Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. There was a lot of attention this past week on the All-Star game, and Sap and I actually did a podcast leading up to it, and then after, sort of reacting about what went wrong, what went right, and the fixes. But something we haven't talked about yet that sort of went, I guess, a little bit under the radar with all the All-Star festivities happening was the announcement of the finalists for the Basketball Hall of Fame. This is a crop of a couple of guys you've definitely men and women you've definitely heard of before, but I mean, we're going to get into it in a second step. I certainly wouldn't call it a strong potential class. So it's headlined by the finalists. Again, they're not in yet. Vince Carter, Chauncey Billups, Doug Collins, and then some media people. But really, those are the three main names from the NBA that people would be aware of. Michael Cooper, I should also say too. People would obviously remember him from his days with the Showtime Lakers. But Sap, we've talked about the Hall of Fame before. My take is they let way too many people in the Basketball Hall of Fame. It's too easy to get in. And if I was looking at this class, I would maybe consider Vince Carter because of the longevity, but I would probably lean towards putting neither of those guys in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the weakest group of finalists I can remember. And the problem with the Basketball Hall of Fame is you're talking about a sport which has 15 players on the roster, 5 starters, and maybe a couple of bench guys among those 15 players. So there's not a lot of, say, inventory to get into the Hall of Fame. Conversely, you look at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, football teams have 22 starters and some specialists. They put in 5 players every year, and there's just more to choose from when you're talking about the Pro Football Hall of Fame. With basketball, it's like there's just not that many players deserving to get into the Hall of Fame. So Vince Carter, I think he'll make it. But again, it's more about longevity. I mean, he ended up with a scoring average of 16 points per game.
Yeah.
Again, his last 7 or 8 years, he was coming off the bench. He wasn't playing much. He's going to get in because he won a dunk contest and may have had the best dunks in the history of the dunk contest. And this coming on the heels of now the dunk contest being irrelevant. So I think he's going to make it. I've always pushed for Chauncey Billups because I thought he was the best player on a championship team, the 04 Pistons. In my heart, I don't really think he's a Hall of Famer, but 5 All-Star appearances, best player on a championship team, that should get him in. I think a comp for him might be Dennis Johnson, who's in the Hall of Fame. May he rest in peace. But Dennis Johnson was a better player than Chauncey Billups. But now if you put Chauncey Billups in, I think at some point we're going to see Drew Holiday as a finalist and maybe a member of the Pro Basketball Hall of Fame, or Basketball Hall of Fame, which I don't know if he's deserving of that. Michael Cooper, okay, here's a comp for Michael Cooper, is Thatch Sanders from the old Celtics, because Michael Cooper is one of 3 Lakers that played on all 5 championship teams in the 80s, along with Kareem and Magic. So, it's kind of like which guy doesn't fit, Kareem, Magic, Michael Cooper. He may make it because, again, 5 championships, but I mean, he's better than Robert Horry, who was on 7 championship teams. And Cooper was a defensive player of the year, all defensive player. Larry Bird called him the toughest defender he ever faced. So I think those 3 guys are going to make it, but it's a really weak class. I mean, Doug Collins, he's kind of in there as a contributor, as a player. He coached. I mean, he would have been a Hall of Famer if he stayed healthy, but he didn't. Doug Collins?
Did he play in the ABA or coached in the ABA?
No, strictly played in the NBA.
I thought he coached in the ABA. Maybe I'm just misremembering.
No, he coached. He was Michael Jordan's coach. In fact, a quick story, I guess I'd call it a run-in. I was covering the league in the 80s. I was working for Time Warner Sports, but also I was freelancing for ESPN. And he was the head coach to the Bulls in 87. They came in and played the Celtics in the first round of the playoffs. And they lost a tough game. And I, in the scrum, there'd be like, 8, 10, 12 of us around the coach after the game. I always ask questions because what the hell am I doing there? I might just stick my microphone in there and wait for everybody else to ask questions. I ask questions, and I asked a question I can't remember. I mean, we're going back over 45, 40 years ago almost. And he said, well, you're a bleeping genius. And I just kind of, let it roll. And he kept talking and talking and talking. And then at the end of it, he kind of came up to me and said, sorry about that. I go, don't worry about it. He's competitive, very competitive guy. If you ever saw any YouTube video of him on the sideline as a coach, he sweat more than any player I've ever seen. Like the perspiration was going through his suit. was like Albert Brooks in broadcast news. But he was fine after that, and great player, but he didn't play a lot of games because he was always injured. Heck, Bill Walton's in the Hall of Fame. He didn't even play 500 games, but Bill Walton was a league MVP and a Finals
Yep.
MVP. Doug Collins was a sensational player, so I don't even know how he's in there as a finalist. Jerry West to me is the easiest one as an executive, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
that's one of
that's a no
yeah,
brainer.
of course, that's a
That's the no
no-brainer.
brainer of the whole group. I mean, and I'm
Yeah.
like, why didn't this happen sooner? Like he should have been in there years ago as an executive. But yeah, this has to be the weakest class I can remember because you go back to every other class. There's generally one that you say, okay, that's a no brainer. That guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer, easy choice. But I don't really see any this time around, other than Jerry West as an executive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, the NBA, it's not the NBA, but the Basketball Hall of
Right.
Fame. You have to separate it because it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, so you have to take into account other things. But they've done themselves a disservice by letting people in that probably, in my mind, shouldn't be in. I think now, for years and years, it was the Baseball Hall of Fame that was the trickiest one, the hardest one to get into. That has since fallen by the wayside, and now it's the standard bearer is the Football Hall of Fame. And really great football players have to wait a long time to get in or never get in.
Mhm.
Eh, I would really like the Basketball Hall of Fame to be similar. Like I don't think of Vince Carter or Chauncey Billups and think, oh yeah, that was a Hall of Fame player. I think a really, really good player, but not a Hall of Fame player. I mean, yes, I agree with you that Billups on that championship team was, I mean, he was the Finals MVP. He was the best player. Does that mean that, every Finals MVP should be in the Hall of Fame? I don't really think that's the case. I don't know that Andre Iguodala should be in the Hall of Fame. Cedric Maxwell isn't in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tough position that I think the Basketball Hall of Fame put themselves in. But if I were running it and it was my personal choice, I would not induct any of those players into the Hall of Fame. Again, Vince Carter, Chauncey Billups, Doug Collins, all really, really excellent, great players. Vince Carter, 8 All-Star games, a second team All-NBA, a third team All-NBA, Rookie of the Year, slam dunk winner. Obviously had a big impact in terms of promoting the game of basketball with him being on the early Raptors teams and growing the sport in Canada. Chauncey Billups, like you said, 5 times All-Star. All NBA second team, 2 times all third team, 2 times all NBA defensive. Like those are really good accomplishments, but it's not supposed to be the hall of really, really good. It's the Hall of Fame where the best of the best. And I don't think that Chauncey Billups and Vince Carter should be, rubbing elbows with Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Michael Jordan and LeBron one day. They're just not even close to being in the same class of player. So
Deion Sanders talked about this at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He goes like, they're cheapening my gold jacket and my statue by putting lesser players into the Hall of Fame. Like, do you have different levels within the Hall of Fame? Like, okay, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Joe Montana, Reggie White, Jerry Rice, Walter Payton. Okay, those are clear cut Hall of Famers, but now we're putting in guys that Devin Hester is going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Like,
yeah.
so he's going to be in the same Hall of Fame with Walter Payton. It doesn't seem to be fair.
At least there's the
So
case there that it's like, okay, he was a specialist and he was the best at his speciality.
true,
The NBA
right?
doesn't really offer that sort of position, which should make it even thinner of a class that should get
Well,
in.
Michael Cooper kind of fits that because he was a defensive player. I mean, he could hit threes. He was fine offensively, but he was playing with Kareem, Magic, Worthy, Byron Scott. Like he didn't have to score much when he was on the court with those guys, but he was a great defender. So he's kind of a specialty guy. Ben Wallace the same way.
Yeah,
Dennis
and he's
Rodman
in. Ben Wallace is
rebounding.
in. Yeah,
Ben Wallace is in. Rodman's in, and Rodman deservedly so. He played on 5 championship teams, and he led the league in rebounding. It felt like every year by a wide margin. He was a great defensive player. So those guys get in. So yeah, it kind of waters it down. That it just so happens also that this year there is no clear cut, no brainer, right? I mean, like
yeah.
again, generally every year there's one that you go, okay, like when Kevin Garnett was eligible, okay, he's getting in. Whoever, Tim Duncan, and oftentimes there's 2 or 3 guys
Yeah,
in the same class
2025
that are
Sap
great.
looks like it's going to be even more bleak. It's Mark Gasol, JJ Redick and Amari Stoudemire.
Man, I
Uh,
mean, how many Amari Stoudemire probably had a better career than Chauncey Billups, but he didn't win a championship.
and
So
was injured a lot too.
and was injured a lot, and then I pushed for Marcus Johnson because he was my favorite player growing up, 5-time All-Star. For about 6-7 years, he was one of the five
I
best players in
put Marcus
basketball. I think
Johnson
he
above Chauncey Billups and
right.
Vince Carter. I'd put him
Yeah,
above those
absolutely.
guys.
And again, it's the Basketball Hall of Fame. Marcus Johnson won a national championship at UCLA and was College Player of the Year. Like, that must mean something. Like, Grant Hill's in the Basketball Hall of Fame partly because of what he accomplished in college. College Player of the Year, 2-time national champion, was injured a lot in the NBA, but you put it all together and you put him in the Hall of Fame. Like, baseball's kind of clear about that. Like, Joe Torre is in the Hall of Fame as a manager, not because he was a good manager and a very good player. He was a great manager and a very good player, but he's in as a manager. So
Right.
you don't commingle what the guys did,
Yeah,
because there are some guys.
it's kind of bastardized it, like it's just
Well,
like it there should be a college basketball Hall of Fame and
right.
a I guess an NBA or Pro Basketball Hall of Fame.
Pro Basketball Hall of Fame, yeah, because it's the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So I guess you
Right.
could count what guys did in Canada. Like, Doug Flutie
Yeah.
should probably be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I know some of the Hall of Fame voters, and I've talked to them about that. And, we've gone back and forth. Doug Flutie was one of the best quarterbacks in the history of Canadian football, as was Warren Moon. Those were probably the two best. Warren Moon's in because he was great in the NFL as well. So, yeah, there's certain things that you have to look at. Now, again, Jerry West should go in as an executive. Tommy Heinsohn's in there in three areas: player, coach, and broadcaster,
Yeah.
which is pretty amazing and deservedly so on all three counts.
Uh,
So I just think that it's so weak this year that, yeah, someone's going to get in. They put these people in. Bo Ryan is also a college coach. The other thing I have a problem with, it seems like every year they put a college coach in. Like, Bob Huggins was inducted 2 or 3 years ago. Why? I mean, he went to the Final Four twice.
right.
That's enough to get you
Because
into the
he's
Basketball Hall
coached
of
a lot
Fame.
of games. I guess it's a
Right.
lunch. It's like they just squat on these jobs, and yeah, you're gonna win a lot of games by virtue of just being there for 30
Two,
years.
two Final Four appearances, that he never coached in a national championship game, and he's in the Hall of Fame. Like,
I think
why?
did Bo Ryan coach in one national championship game and they lost the
Yes,
one
with
with
Wisconsin.
Kaminsky?
Yep.
Yeah, with Frank
Yep.
Kaminsky. Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
gets you into the Basketball Hall of Fame, really? I mean,
It should put him into the Wisconsin Hall of Fame, certainly.
I'm for that. Absolutely. Yeah, go do that. Give him a big cheese
uh,
head.
Sap, and then the next year, where the next surefire Hall of Famer that I see is 2026 and Carmelo Anthony. That's a no brainer to me. Carmelo Anthony is a yes, no brainer.
Yep, agree with that.
And then the other guy in 2026 who is going to be eligible is LaMarcus Aldridge. I'd say also a borderline. I also would put him ahead of Vince Carter and Chauncey Billups, probably.
Well, Carter's going to get in because of the 8 All-Star game appearances. That's a pretty significant number.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pushing forward
Still wouldn't
Chauncey
put him
Billups
in,
with
but
5.
I get that. I get that
Well,
8 is a
you're a little
significant
tougher
number.
than I am. Yeah,
Yeah.
eight's a significant number. I mean, I'm pushing Chauncey Billups and Marcus Johnson with 5 All-Star game appearances. So Vince has 8, and that's a slam dunk contest. And look, he's a likable guy,
It
right?
was an
He's doing
important, I
work
will
now for
say it was
ESPN.
an important slam dunk contest. It's still probably the
Yes.
most played slam dunk contest of all time because it was just an amazing moment for him in the league to see him do that. So, like, in terms of, he did have a historic NBA moment with that slam dunk contest.
So did D Brown, though, and we're not putting him in the Hall of Fame.
That's true. Do you want to
You know
push
what I'm
for him
saying?
to
I
go
mean,
in?
yeah, Mac McClung has won 2 dunk
Oh, he's
contests.
on his
Let's
way. Yeah.
put
Nate
him in there.
Robinson
Yeah,
won 3 in a row, Sap.
right. Put him in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, so it's just watered down. Vince Carter's going to make it. I think Billups could make it. He's coaching in the league right now. Michael Cooper, because he won 5 championships with the Lakers and he was a great defensive player. Maybe Larry Bird shows up to his induction, which is doubtful. Larry Bird doesn't leave the state of Indiana anytime in the near future. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Jerry West, to me, is the no-brainer as an executive. And every time I think of it, it's like, why wasn't he inducted years ago as that? I mean, he was a great executive like 35 years ago.
Yeah. For what it's worth, Sap, here's some of the guys who are, candidates who have not gotten in yet that, maybe you want to consider. You mentioned Marcus Johnson. We mentioned Michael Cooper. Joe Johnson, it's another name. Sean Marion and Horace Grant. Any
Yeah,
of
I
those
wouldn't put any of
guys?
them in. No, no. No, I mean Horace Grant won 3 championships, but no, I wouldn't put him in. He was a good player. He was a good defensive player. One of the few teammates that stood up to Michael Jordan, which is a pretty cool thing. No, I wouldn't put him in there. Sean Marion was good defender. Kind of had that most awkward looking shot I've ever seen, but it would go in. And Joe Johnson. I mean, Joe
Seven-time
Johnson.
All-Star Joe Johnson for
I
what it's
know,
worth.
I
So,
know. So if you put Vince Carter in,
but
now Joe
also
Johnson has a case,
16 points per game, for his
right?
career.
Because yeah, you play forever and those numbers go down. You score 20,000 points, but you play 1,400 games. Do the math.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's again, I don't like the direction it's headed in, but when you open up the floodgates, you open up the floodgates, and so there's guys who will be saying, I was just as good or better than this guy who got in,
Sure.
and so I mean, you could certainly make the case Joe Johnson was just as good of a pro as Chauncey Billups or Vince Carter. I mean, it's not like any of those stand out heads and shoulders above the rest.
Yeah, and the
Sean
Celtics had
Marion
Joe
was,
Johnson. The Celtics
yeah.
had Joe Johnson and Chauncey Billups.
They did indeed. And Rick Pitino saw to destroying that in a hurry.
The
Um,
other thing I wanted to bring up, Jet, before we move on, is
yeah.
why does it have to be a specific number that make it? I mean, I like this happens in football,
Why
like
can't it be
5 players.
zero? Yeah, why can't it be
Why can't
zero?
it be zero? Baseball got that part of it right. Like you have to get a certain percentage, and there's some years no one makes it. There's some
Right.
years
Why not?
four make it. Yeah, I mean, so if you get to a year, I'm just throwing this out there, but if LeBron, Durant, Curry, pick 3 other guys that are Hall of Fame worthy, all retired the same year, one of them is going to get left out. Now, it's not likely, but it could happen.
Yeah. It would be
This
Durant.
happens. Uh, well, he'd fall behind LeBron and Curry.
Right.
If that's the case. But this happens in football too. Like I'm convinced that Aaron Rodgers was not going to retire the same year as Tom Brady because he didn't want
No.
to share the stage with Tom Brady at the Hall of Fame, and they would have to put both of those guys in first year of eligibility because they're two of the greatest quarterback ever and one of the 6 or 7 best quarterbacks of the Super Bowl era. So they both make it on their first time on the ballot. But yeah, that's the other thing is like, okay, we've got to put 5 players in, so the fifth guy isn't really worthy, but he just was lucky to be in that particular year.
Yeah, it's gotten silly, and I think almost every year it gets worse and worse. And although, like you said, with the Baseball Hall of Fame, that they do have that right that you don't have to say, okay, this is a year where nobody gets in. I think that's great. But then baseball, just they for some reason, well, they have two things that's going on with them. One, their voting block is ancient and just doesn't pay attention to baseball anymore, or is so stubborn about steroids or whatever that they won't vote for them. And the other problem is they started letting in guys who were just far below that Hall of Fame level after a period of time. Who got in this year, Sap, that was in the Baseball Hall of
Well, a
Fame
couple
that
of
I
years ago, it
was.
was Harold Baines. He got in through the Veterans Committee, which shocked me. Todd Helton made it this year,
Yeah,
which I
Todd
don't think
Helton.
he's Hall of Fame worthy. I
Yeah,
don't
that
think he's Hall of
was
Fame
a
worthy.
very good player, but oh
Yeah,
man, I
Scott
don't
Rowland
know.
the year before. Scott
Yeah,
Rowland the
Scott
year
Rowland,
before.
great defensive player, but holy moly,
Yeah,
I don't know that I'd put Scott Rowland in the Hall of Fame. Uh, the only guy that I was like that got voted in that was like yes, of course was
Adrian
uh
Beltre.
Beltre, yeah, who was
Yeah,
just a
Beltre.
just a phenom who also and
Mm-hmm.
the Red Sox screwed that one up too because he was only on the team for 1 year. Joe Mauer got in, another good player, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that would put him into the Hall of Fame.
So now Joe Mauer's in. That means Buster Posey gets in because
Yeah,
Buster
I would
Posey
sure.
won 3 World Series titles, but doesn't even have 900 RBI.
And an MVP
Like,
too.
yeah, he has an MVP. Mauer has an MVP. That gets you in the Hall of Fame. But I can't take a Hall of Fame seriously. It doesn't have the best player in the history of the sport in it,
Yeah,
and
it's
Barry Bonds,
ridiculous.
and the best
Arguably
pitcher
the
of the
best
last
pitcher.
50
Yeah.
years. Right, Roger Clemens. I mean, they're not in there, and the hits leader's not in there. So what are we doing here?
Yeah. So, it's the Hall of Fames. Some of the luster has come off them. Right now, I think far and away, it's the Pro Football Hall of Fame is the best at what they do. So
Maybe it's
just
hockey since no one talks about it. Maybe they're
I
the
don't even
best
know
by
who the hell
default.
goes in. Yeah, I mean, we'd be making things up, Sap, if we started talking about the Hockey Hall of Fame. Or at least I would. I don't know. Maybe you secretly know a lot about how the numbers that get you into the Hockey Hall of Fame. I don't even know how the
Yeah,
voting works for the Hockey Hall of Fame. Who votes or what? So
yeah, a couple of guys up in Canada.
yeah, I would imagine Canada. Maybe Putin has a vote. He loves hockey.
Yes, he scored 9 goals in his debut as a player.
sure those were all. I'm sure the goalie was really putting in a maximum effort on those shots.
I know. Imagine being the goalie with Putin coming down the wing. It's like, if I stop the
Oof.
puck, good for me. If I don't stop the puck, I may be dead.
Yeah, not an enviable enviable job. But switching to somebody who I feel is going to be in the Hall of Fame when their career is over, though it's just getting started. Caitlin Clark mania has gripped the country sap. The senior from Iowa University of Iowa is the most famous collegiate athlete in the country, and I would say probably the best collegiate athlete in the country right now. Certainly the best basketball player of the collegiate players. That includes men's and women's. Leading the NCAA in scoring and assists, averaging almost 33 points a game and almost 9 assists a game, Sap, and just broke the all-time scoring record for women's college basketball a couple days ago. She shoots from the logo, very much like Steph Curry. She shoots about 40% from three also, so it's not like she's just kind of hoping and chucking them up there. Sap, do you ever remember this much hype and attention around a female basketball player? You're the podcast historian, so
Cheryl Miller, but I mean, again, that was like 40 years ago. Cheryl Miller's like my age. She was like Will Chamberlain, or at least putting up Will Chamberlain like numbers in college at USC. Then the sport kind of died down, and then Tennessee and Connecticut dominated the sport forever.
yep.
My favorite female college player ever was Maya Moore from Connecticut. I thought she just had the most well-rounded game, and I like her even more as a person for a lot of the things she's done off the court, right? For racial justice, fighting racial injustice in our country. She's phenomenal. She's could be like Time Person of the Year at some point. That's how high my opinion is of Maya Moore. She's my favorite collegiate player of all time among the ladies, and I think she's one of the greatest players ever. The thing that makes Caitlin Clark different is she's playing at a place that doesn't have a great history of
Right.
winning at Iowa, right? So when Doug Gottlieb came out and called Caitlin Clark Jimmer Fredette, like kind of like a sideshow, then it wasn't translating into wins. Didn't Iowa make it to the national championship game last year?
They did. Yes, they did.
And they lost, right? Okay, so that's quite an accomplishment because in college basketball, like one or two teams dominate, and they tend to have like 4 or 5 of the top 10
Yeah, and it's
players
not
in the
Iowa.
sport. And it's not Iowa. It's not generally been Iowa. It's been, recently South Carolina, LSU, Connecticut, Tennessee. Connecticut would have like 3 of the top 6 players in the country on the same team.
Connecticut didn't lose a game for like 5 years, Sap.
Yeah, they were the most dominant team in all sports, right? And like I said, if you had the first team All-American team, 3 of them would be from Connecticut. So of course they're going to win the national championship. It's like when UCLA was dominant in the 60s. My guy Marcus Johnson in the 70s was coming off the bench, for God's sake.
Yeah, this is much more reminiscent of like a Larry Bird Indiana State thing.
Exactly.
I think that's, the sort of the closer comparison, but
Yep.
I think it's great, as somebody, and Sap, I know you have sisters too, as somebody with sisters, and I love seeing women's basketball being promoted because it's the sport's caught up so much to what the men do other than the dunking. And I love seeing these role models for young women. And Caitlin Clark not only seems like, an exceptional basketball player, but a really great ambassador for the game. And she's really fun to watch, Sap. Like her highlights are like watching Steph Curry highlights.
Mm-hmm. She's a better passer than Steph Curry.
Yeah, I mean, leading the league, leading the NCAA in assists, Sap.
She's
and by the way, she also is averaging
ball.
7 rebounds a game too. So, and she's a guard. So
yeah,
she's obviously going to be the #1 pick in the WNBA draft. There's a lot of hype and excitement around her. And I was wondering, Sap, maybe it's a dumb question. She's 6 feet tall. So it's not like she's, she would be one of the shortest players in the NBA, but wouldn't be the shortest player in league history by any means. There's a couple guys who are about 6 feet, 6'1". She seemingly has limitless range. Could she be somebody who could an NBA team look at her as somebody who could come off the bench and shoot threes for her? Is that a realistic thing?
The only role she could have, Jet, would be at the end of a quarter, call a timeout, set up a play for her, right? Because she's obviously a great shooter. Now, again, the 3-point line is closer for women's basketball than the NBA. The ball is different, so you have to factor that in as well. Obviously, the physical limitations are there, and I'm not being sexist, just being realistic here. She's 6 feet tall. I mean, if she played 2 or 3 minutes in the NBA, who exactly is she guarding? I mean,
She
is she
can't
going to
guard. No,
guard?
she can't play defense. Do that. That
No.
you can't ask her to do that. That wouldn't
Yeah, she's
happen.
playing. She's playing against the Celtics. She's checking Drew Holiday, who's 6'4", 230. Like, what kind of matchup is that? Maybe the end of a quarter. Call a timeout. Brad Stevens was great at that stuff. Joe Mazzulla, not so much. Diagram a play for her and see what happens. But now you've turned it into a novelty. I think she would just be better going to WNBA, building her brand there. Because she's making a ton of money at Iowa. She's not going to make as
Yeah,
much
a lot.
money in the WNBA from the team, but she's going to have endorsements. And the great thing is that you see a lot of the NBA players really embrace the WNBA, namely Steph Curry. He's obviously the most popular player among the women players in the world. The
Oh, you
women
could
players
see. I
love
mean, her
Steph
game
Curry.
is very, very much modeled after.
Oh,
I mean, that's why the women's 3-point line is shorter, but she's not shooting from there anyways. She's shooting
no,
from
no,
half court.
she's hoisting from 24, 25, 30 feet. Yeah, I mean, she's just like Dame Lillard and Steph Curry out there. It's pretty impressive to watch. So I just can't see it happening other than it being a novelty. And
What
and
would it
really,
take,
what
Sap,
would that do?
for a woman to play in the NBA? Is that even a possibility?
You know, First name that comes to mind would be Brittany Griner because she was 6'8". But
Right.
at 6'8", how much is she going to dominate inside? Is she going to dominate Anthony Davis?
So you feel like
Or
need to be a tall player who can shoot threes?
yeah. So I'm going to go like, was it Cheryl Swoops who was about 6'4", 6'5", who had
I
a
don't,
full court game?
I don't remember
I
how tall
I
she
I,
was, but I can look
I
that
think
up.
she was. Yeah, I think Cheryl Swoops was about 6'4", 6'5", and she had an all court game. Tamika Catchings was
Yep.
also 6'2", 6'3". Again, 6'2", 6'3". You're going to be one of the shortest
You're
people
one
on
of
the
the
court.
shortest players. It's like about
Yeah,
Peyton
sure.
Pritchard. Peyton Pritchard's like 6'2", 6'3".
Right, and he looks tiny out there. Jason Tatum's 6'9" with guard skills, so that's what you're facing. It would have to be someone like that, 6'4", 6'5", who could shoot threes, because then they can get their shot off a lot easier than say someone who's 6 feet tall. I mean, you could set picks for them, but what the hell are they going to do on the defensive end? That's going to be a major problem. It just is. It's just
Yeah.
the way it
The
is. I mean, I'm not breaking news here.
the last part of the discourse sort of with her that I want to talk about, and I think she's a fascinating player because she's getting the attention of a national audience, which women's collegiate basketball typically does not do. And she's,
Mm-hmm.
being a topic of debate on ESPN daily. Jay Williams saying, he's not willing to call her great yet because she hasn't won a national championship. As somebody who also follows college basketball and has for a while, Sap, that really isn't a fair standard, in my opinion, to put on
Larry
a
Bird
player.
didn't. No, Larry Bird didn't win a national championship, so I guess he wasn't a great collegian. He took me, you, and like two of your neighbors to the national championship game against Michigan State. So Larry Bird's not great because he didn't win a national championship. That's
It's such a Duke
idiotic.
thing to say, by
Of
Jay.
course, yeah.
It's such a Duke thing to say. Like, and they all think like, yeah, JJ Redick was getting in trouble with the media this week too for they have this air of superiority about them when you go to Duke.
Well, they're basically a-holes. Like, they've cornered the market on being a-holes, right? And that's why some of the more recent players that were one and done, like Jason Tatum, I don't think he necessarily has the Duke stink on him as much as, say, J.J. Redick and Jay Williams.
Yeah.
Obviously, a much better player than those two guys. What's pretty amazing, and you talk about Duke and what they accomplished over the years with Mike Krzyzewski. Connecticut's won as many national championships over the last 30 years as Duke, as has North Carolina. Each of those programs has won 5 national championships since the early 80s. I'll go back even 40 years. Connecticut's won 5 in the last 25 years. So you can make a case over the last 25 years, Connecticut's been the best program, and they've put forth a lot of great pros as well.
Yeah.
Ray Allen, Richard Hamilton, just go on down the list. A lot of great players from the
Kemba Walker.
University of
Yeah.
Connecticut. Kemba Walker, Rudy Gay, Caron Butler, all great
Yeah.
players. And
Emeka
they don't,
Okafor. Yeah. A lot
right?
of really
Yeah.
good players. Yeah.
And they don't carry themselves like that, the way
No.
that, and again, Duke pushes itself as the Harvard of the South, and it's a great place. And so is North Carolina, though. North Carolina's a great school as well, and they don't carry themselves in how they had Michael Jordan play for them. So, but the amazing thing with Duke is only two Duke Blue Devils have won NBA championships. One being Kyrie Irving, the
Oh
other one
yeah,
being
Kyrie
Shane
Irving.
Battier, right? Shane Battier. and they both won it because of LeBron. And I know Kyrie hit the
So
big
only
shot against
one in
Golden
like
State.
a
I get it.
main role too. Kyrie Irving
It
was.
was
I mean,
Kyrie
Battier
Irving
was a reserve at
and
that point in
Grant
his
Hill's
career.
and Grant Hill's the only one that's in the Hall of Fame. And he's a
Mm.
borderline Hall of Famer because he missed a lot of time. And Grant Hill doesn't carry himself like that. But
No.
Grant Hill Grant Hill's just a different dude, But although you may get a difference of opinion from Jalen Rose, remember,
Yeah, yeah.
when they were
They did
doing
not
the
like him.
documentary, did not like Grant Hill. I mean, Grant Hill grew up a man of privilege. I mean, his father was a pro football player, Calvin Hill, who went to Yale. His mother was best friends with Hillary Clinton. She was an accomplished attorney. I mean, he grew up, a man of privilege. So, yeah, the whole Duke thing is a turnoff. We went down that rabbit hole talking about Jay Williams and JJ Redick, and
Well, JJ Redick this week was, basically shaming people, calling people like idiots because he gets more views on social media when he, has a salacious topic criticizing Doc Rivers versus like breaking down X's and O's. And he's like, people don't want to actually know about the game because it's just like, shut up. You know,
yeah,
I don't,
yeah, and
it's just they really give off that air of snobbiness. And since the one and done era, it's changed. Um, but yeah, those guys who are lifetime Dukies are just really come across like bricks. They do.
well, it's like Zion doesn't have that. Zion seems like very much a fun-loving kid to the point where he's uh, very
Yeah, having
fun-loving.
too much fun.
May I
Mm-hmm.
say he's having a lot of loving going on too.
Mm-hmm.
But
Is
yeah,
there a football
those.
equivalent to that, Sap, in your mind? Is it that they carry
It's
themselves
not
like that?
Alabama. It's not Alabama. Trying to think if it was maybe for a time USC,
Notre Dame?
Notre Dame. Yeah, there's the one. You got it. I would say Notre Dame has that air of superiority
USC in
for
like
sure.
the 80s, maybe?
Yeah, late '70s, early '80s. I mean, they were loaded. They had 5 future NFL
Yeah,
offensive linemen.
I agree with you
Marcus
that
Allen
Alabama
was a
doesn't
blocking
carry themselves like that.
fullback for Charles
Yeah.
White. I mean, he had 2 Heisman Trophy. And here's another little tidbit: a USA quarterback has never won a Super Bowl,
Wow. And they
and
produce
only
that's like quarterback university.
right has never not only won a Super Bowl. I don't think he's ever played in a Super Bowl, and only one Ohio State quarterback has played in a Super Bowl. It's a trick question.
Why? Because he was on the bench?
He played very sparingly, and then he transferred to another place, won a Heisman, and is my favorite quarterback right now is Joe Burrow.
Oh,
Joe
yeah, that's
Burrow
right. He did
was
start at
at Ohio
Ohio
State.
State. He
Yeah,
transferred to
yeah,
LSU.
yep.
Well,
So
maybe CJ Stroud breaks that curse, Sap.
I wouldn't bet against him. He's pretty darn good.
Yeah, but yeah. So okay, so Notre Dame is the Duke of the college
I would
football
say
world. I
so.
think
Yeah,
that
I would
that's
say
fair.
so.
They hold
Yeah.
themselves. They think they're better than everybody else, even though they've won either the same in Duke's case or less. Notre Dame hasn't won squat in a long time. So and
Last national championship was 1988.
when they were in the national championship game, they just got absolutely destroyed.
Right.
That was the year where they had Manti Te'o and all that
Mm-hmm.
craziness surrounding him too, and they were just
Mm-hmm.
absolutely run off the field. But it is interesting, and I think Caitlin Clark's great for the sport. It's very interesting to have the most famous collegiate athlete be a woman. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool, and I think she's growing the sport, which is great. And I think the men are interested in watching it. And I think we saw it with the NBA All-Star Weekend with Sabrina Ionescu, who was also very popular. Competing against Steph Curry. Maybe Caitlin Clark gets involved next year, and they continue to grow the sport that way. It doesn't have to be directly competing with the men, but against them in certain things. I think that creates a lot of avenues for growth.
True.
So we will see what becomes of Caitlin Clark. We'll see who becomes the next basketball Hall of Famers. Again, I would put nobody in there, but Sap, maybe Marcus Johnson does get in eventually. If these guys get in, then he should get in. I mean, again, it's sort of a matter of once you just let everybody in, then you might as well let everybody in.
Yep, I agree
All
with
right.
that.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us here, Sap, at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks to Full Press Coverage. Go check out their website. Lots of great content and lots of NFL draft stuff will be, I'm sure, up on their site soon as we're starting to get into combine season and all that. I know I am checking every single day to see what the Patriots are looking at doing as I'm sadly watching the Patriots documentary on Apple TV, Sap, the Dynasty. Have you watched that yet?
Yeah, they're really kicking Bill Belichick out the door.
What is this?
which is
Jesus Christ! What did he
unfortunate.
kill? Did he kill a Kraft son that I don't know about?
Well, well. Apparently, the Crafts have like 7 sons. Because Drew Bledsoe was the fifth son till
Yeah, I
they
know.
didn't need him anymore, and Tom Brady was the sixth son till they didn't need him anymore, and Mac Jones like apparently was the grandson, and we know Mike Reese is another son for the Crafts. And if these guys were all their sons, why didn't Robert Kraft offer 7% of the franchise to Tom Brady for a decent chunk of change the way the Raiders offered Brady 7% of the franchise? Don't get me started on the Crafts. I think they're the most overrated ownership group in all of football. Take Tom Brady out of the equation, and obviously Bill Belichick as well. What exactly have they accomplished? They also have a soccer team, the New England Revolution, who were part of the kickoff of the league back in 1996. Do you realize the New England Revolution are the only original team in MLS that's never won a championship? So,
Yeah, that's no good. No
everyone talks
good.
about how great the Crafts are. Well, like a lot of other people in that organization on the way down, coaches, players, they should all give 10% of their net worth to Tom Brady. Let's call that the GOAT tax.
Yeah, two messy exits with Brady and Belichick's. Not Belichick. Not like these were really amicable situations. How they ended.
No. And again, it's everything that went well is Robert Kraft's doing, and everything that went poorly is Bill Belichick's fault. Like, this
Yeah.
is the way the whole thing is going to be painted. And I'm not a huge Belichick fan, but the guy's a great coach. Come on. He contributed a lot to this, more Brady than Belichick. I get it. But now Kraft has got this revisionist history of, what took place 20 odd years ago with Bledsoe and Brady. And let's not forget, Bledsoe's play had really diminished his last 2 years with the Patriots.
Yeah, I saw a
19.
stat. Someone was putting it up.
Yeah.
His last number 7 games against Mac Jones. Last 7 games, and Mac Jones had
Oh,
out. That's how bad Mac Jones has been. That bad, and Bledsoe's numbers were worse.
yeah. His last 2+ years, I believe 13 and 21, 38 touchdowns, 36 interceptions. And I think in his last 26 starts, he was 7 and 19 with like 24 touchdowns and 32 interceptions. He was a bad quarterback for 2+ years. So they were ready to move on from Bledsoe at some point. But again, there's revisionist history that Brady came in and set the world on fire and was the greatest
Right.
quarterback ever. The defense had a lot to do with what they did in 2001, special teams. But the thing is, Brady took care of the football and came up big in big moments, two things that Bledsoe couldn't do.
Yeah, maybe Sap and I should do a football podcast too. But if you
Why
want
not?
some great stuff, go to Full Press Coverage. Also, check out our boss Ian Glendon's Twitter page, which is basically just him arguing with people about how Tom Brady's the greatest of all time. Now it's just him arguing back and forth.
Greatest human being
Yeah.
of all time. Not
It's
just
essentially
football
just a
player.
Tom Brady fan page of him arguing with Kansas City Chiefs fans, which is hey, somebody's got to, it's dirty work. Somebody's got to do it. You can check out our social medias at John Sapp 25 at Jet Stryer. Sapp will be arguing about LeBron James and how he's the greatest human being of all time. And I will be I don't know, watching meaningless Celtics highlights. I'll watch some Marcus Smart highlights to keep me entertained. But yeah, so check us out. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we will be back with a new podcast soon. Talk to you later. See ya.